Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce Libero Copper and Gold to you today, an exploration company that holds a collection of porphyry copper deposits throughout the Americas in prolific jurisdictions. The portfolio includes the Macoa, Esperanza, Big Bulk, and Big Red projects. For the webinar today, we have with us Ian Harris, President and CEO. Ian will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities currently underway at its projects. After the presentation, we'll take your questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started though, I do need to mention the fine print. For Libero Copper and Gold, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Libero Copper and Gold corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Libero Copper and Gold specific disclosures. With that, Ian, I'll hand it over to you. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to try and go through this and hopefully leave some time for question and answers. I thought it was important to do a update on where we're sitting with the company. It's especially considering the market and the backdrop, and get a bigger picture of what is going on within the company. Obviously, please do lots of forward-looking statements in the presentation. And I've had a lot of conversations recently about the backdrop overall of copper. And I heard somebody say it's one of the best long-term stories that anyone has ever heard, but really is looking for that particular catalyst. And I'm starting to see this backdrop in the background, because I think everybody has heard the story, and I would be preaching to the choir to talk about the importance of copper in the overall energy transition, et cetera, et cetera. But there is one fundamental piece of the story, and that is in the majority of all the other metals, we have a production problem, but in copper, we truly have a deposit problem. Right? There just is not enough copper deposits to supply the world with enough copper. So the question becomes, why are we not seeing the catalyst in overall market? And to summarize the problem, I love this slide, because this is the 10 biggest mines in the world, and they produce 5.7 million tons of copper a year, and the demand just for the energy transition is about the same amount. So we have 7 years to duplicate all these mines, and as we know, that's impossible because the deposits don't even exist. But what is the overall catalyst that will really spark things moving forward? And so we see a lot of M&A going on in the overall market, but it's all focused on production. It's not focused on projects. So everybody's trying to get their piece of the existing pie, but it's really not spurring on yet what's happening on exploration and seeing, in at least like a Libero size company, the overall catalyst to move market forward. And I'm a true believer that this slide here explains what is the upcoming catalyst. And this market is completely different. It's different than it's ever been before, because we have very high copper prices, but we don't have the motion going on yet in the equities market. But it's these car companies, and it's just an example of the O&Ms that need to they need to secure their supply chains. There's a onshoring, there's a de-risking, there's a decoupling from China, whatever you would like to call it, going on the planet. And these companies right now want to secure their overall copper supply. And this is the real catalyst that's happening right now, and happening as these companies are securing their offtake. So I feel that we're right on the cusp of when the market is really going to turn, and this is going to be the overall catalyst. And I think it's coming very, very soon. And I think it's an important backdrop overall for the company, because we are built around a group of people. My personal experience, I'm a mining engineer for 25 years in the industry, and a lot of my time living and working in South America, and a group of people that have been associated with projects that have become future mines. And I don't think there's a lot of companies out there that can actually say the same, right? Whether they're exploration stories or about a discovery. We're really about a group of having deposits that have the potential to become future mines. And that's the way I wake up every morning, and I think of our deposits. And I think about Mocoa. I know the importance of generating drill results, but the background is this is $1 billion type asset. And how do you treat it to make sure that it becomes a future mine? And understanding that the world needs it, and it's just a question of time. So it's really a long-term overall thought process on how we treat our projects. So I was senior vice president of Corriente Resources and took the Mirador project all the way to the start of construction, and went on to become the first large-scale mining industrial scale operation in the history of Ecuador. Ernie Mass, one of our directors, did almost the same story at Cobre Panama, one of the world's largest copper mines in the world, in Panama, the first industrial scale project in the history of Panama. But we're built around a group of people that have that background and that experience, and have a huge partner with Anglo-Asian who have done the same in a jurisdiction called Azerbaijan. So that is the focus we have. It's not just about getting out and getting drilling results, but making sure we're taking care of a project that is going to become a future mine. So I'm going to jump down now into, I think, what is our most important and biggest asset, even though probably not the one that has the short-term catalysts, but it is the Mocoa project in Colombia. And it's important because, first, its location, right? The world needs about twice as much copper to be produced, and there is a copper belt that goes from Chile, but on the border of Chile and Argentina, all the way up through Panama, that is producing currently the majority of the world's copper. Just Peru and Chile alone are producing 45% of the world's copper. So big deposits and big projects are going to be coming off of this belt. This is where the future production is coming from. I was, in this little map, you can see where Mirador is. That's on the Jurassic Belt section of this copper belt. And luckily, right across the border into Colombia, the same Jurassic Belt is the Mocoa project. And it's a project that has a very significant resource already developed, but it's still got lots of room to grow. And I'm going to say why I enjoy and I like a lot Colombia. First of all, you have a economy that's based on oil and coal. And many people don't know it's the 5th largest producer of coal in the world. But you have, whether it's world direction moving to an energy transition or because of politics, the country needs to move away from dependence on oil and gas. And only projects as the size of Mocoa really give the potential to be economy and country builders. And then something very special happened about a few weeks ago where copper became one of the strategic metals of the United States. So you have a country like Colombia that is very close to the United States. It's a major non-NATO ally that's the same status as Australia or Japan. and it counts towards the Inflation Reduction Act in order to any copper that would be produced from Colombia would count towards the incentives, which are up to 10% of the sales price of a final product. It's a huge incentive, a huge relationship to develop the copper projects within Colombia. So there's a lot of things that are lining up. You have a president who is very much focused on the energy transition, has specifically come out. I know there's a lot of noise coming out of Colombia, and I think it's the mixed bag of not pushing forward oil and gas production, but very heavily focused into the strategic metals. And I think people are missing that part of the story in Colombia, because the president, I'm worried now that I just lost connection. Is there any way of knowing if you can actually hear me?
Ian, we can hear you.
Okay, because I just got a very funny sound that sounded like something was shutting down. Okay, so I appreciate that. So Colombia is still very much focused in using its natural resources to become part of the energy transition and the industrialization, the future economy of Colombia. And it has very few options, right? And Mocoa really is the biggest option that it has to be a company builder. And so you have to date, Mocoa is 636 million tons. It already contains 2 million tons of copper. And it is also one of the world's largest Moly deposits. I think after Pebble, which just by sheer size, not by grade, it's the world's the second largest untapped Moly deposit in the world. We know that Moly today is at $25, but it's a pure energy transition play for the country. And before I go into some of the technicals, I want to give that as a backdrop, and because many people know the overall story. We have, as a company, been working and thinking with this long-term vision of how to develop this project in hand with the Colombian government. And it's because we understand how long it can take to actually develop a project this size. It's the lessons learned from Panama. It's the lessons learned from Ecuador. And Colombia is going through a minor political crisis. You have a president who's been marred by multiple scandals. And has really lost his coalition of Congress. And that's been a big pause for us because we were working directly with the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Finance, to develop the Mocoa project as a larger part of the National Development Plan. But there is something also very encouraging that's going on in the background, and that is once the political crisis passes and you no longer have the control of the legislative branch, it's all about delivery from your executive branch. So we're getting those hits back now of getting more focused on driving forward the overall national plan and how Mocoa can be on the backdrop of that, how Mocoa plays a part in the overall development of Colombia. And I want to reassure everyone, it's not because I see some questions coming up. Mocoa is not about a permit issue. It's about we're in a highly polarized political situation where we don't want to be a lightning rod just because we're drilling. It's about understanding the overall value of a project, and we need to make sure it's on solid ground. So there are significant catalysts coming up at the Mocoa project, and it's one of two. One would be original the overall plan of the project to become a part of the overall national development plan of the country. The second one is actually very interesting because and those that have been following the story, we have developed extremely good relationships on the ground and developed those with our local community. And now the local elections are coming up in October. And surprisingly, for the first time in a long time, the overall platform of local politics is very much focused on development, creation of jobs, and see the Mocoa project as a underpinning the development of Putumayo. So I understand many people have had a lot of patience, but it's a patience for a very big prize. And the Mocoa project is about to bear fruit between now and the end of the year. And it's a prize that's overall worth it. It's already contains 2 million tons of copper. It's in a location that has solid infrastructure. It has power lines. It has road network. It's in an area where nobody is living, so there's no actual people living there, but it's still close to a population. And it's the largest resource of copper in Colombia. So I feel that we've put a very solid plan together for the Moly project. And it is now getting to that point where it's going to be bearing fruit. Just like what we did in Ecuador or what we did in Panama, it is now all those tiny little things that we've done are now going to be the platform for moving this project forward. And I'm going to not overdo it and make sure that we talk about I think which is our nearest term catalyst, which is our Esperanza project in Argentina. So in Argentina right now, the Esperanza project is a project that everybody is very excited about because in 2018, the last drill hole into this project was over 387 meters at about a 0.75 equivalent copper, where the first 200 meters were about a 1% equivalent copper with a very strong gold overprint on the project. Unfortunately, in 2018, in Argentina, in copper, there was not a lot of interest, but it is an amazing project. And now in San Juan, which is one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world, is now getting all the attention, and we've been spending our time to get the permits in place. And so I wanted to take this time to give a little bit of the backdrop of what happened. So this was a project that's not in the high Andes Mountains, and I hope that the next slide shows its overall location, but it is in the higher upper plains of Argentina. And it was a project in 2018 that had its exploration license suspended. So we have been taking the time on this project to actually redo the entire permitting process. And we've fortunately have redeveloped the relationships with the ministry, with the local community. Here, I love this picture that's up on the upper left-hand corner, because these are the same landowners that were the reason why the permit was originally suspended. And we have gone back in and redeveloped those relationships to redo the overall permit of the project. And it required a pretty lengthy bureaucratic process of getting the permit into place again. And we had to go out to about 9 different agencies: the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Cultural History, the Ministry of Infrastructure, one by one, to get a positive report from each and every single one of those external ministries. And we are literally on the very last step in that permitting process, which is a report by the mayor of Hachag, which is the local mayor, and a minister who I now talk to almost on a weekly basis, who says, I just need his report. I don't need it to be positive. I don't need it to be negative. I don't need it to be anything, but I need the report in this very administrative process, and the permit will start. So I would like, I feel like a kid in a candy store with my face pressed up against the glass. But we are on absolutely the last step to getting this project reactivated. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I know that we are right there, weeks away before this project is reactivated. And this is the most important catalyst, I think, in the very short term. We are doing a financing to date because we really, really wanted to have this permit in place before we started the financing. But of course, reality is what sets in, and it was something we had to do. But I'm very excited because this near-term catalyst is so close to being accomplished in a very short period of time. Elections were held in May of the year. We've already developed a solid relationship with the new mayor, with the new government, with the new governor. I think all the stars are aligned for Argentina, and it's really going to be a question of when that permit gets into place. But we are right on the cusp. And so I know that this is the most important near-term catalyst for the company. Okay. And I think the only other important backdrop on a overall explanation of the company is that we are obviously doing a financing. We're doing a financing to make sure that it's actually put into place to make sure that we get across the finish line on some of these significant catalysts, whether it's in Argentina or whether or not it's in Argentina or in Colombia. It was something we were hoping we could do after getting the permit in place in Argentina, but reality is kicking in. So I don't want to waste any more time just going over an old presentation. I think it's probably best to get into some of the questions.
Okay, Ian. Thank you for that. Just as a reminder to our audience, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So, Ian, a few questions here. I guess, you talked about the political situation in Colombia. So what you're really saying is you don't expect anything to change and support for the project to continue.
I guess my biggest point is that we take a long-term vision on the Mocoa project, right? It's already a very large deposit. It's got lots of rooms to grow. So the real prize at Mocoa is not just getting drilling, but actually to get it on a pathway that it becomes a future mine. But I do see some significant catalysts in Colombia that would support the overall development of the project, whether it's local elections in October. Again, it's about not, I know it's hard to picture this when we're living in Canada or the United States or in Europe, but if Mocoa project is politically can be very much a lightning rod. And I've lived through this. I've lived through this in multiple countries because they're so big and so important. A Mocoa project at a small development scale is still the largest metal mine in the entire country, right? So you don't want it to be in a status where it becomes that lightning rod and you can't protect it. You don't have the voice to be able to filter through the misinformation. So that is why it's so important to either have on a national level the president supporting an overall development story that includes the Mocoa project, or a very, very strong vocal local government, regional government that is supporting the project. But we're not talking years away. Again, local elections now are in our, and we're seeing this swing where the executive branch of the government focuses on the political strife, and now it's going back to doing its job, right? There was a report out, I loved it, where Petro beat his hand on one of his cabinet meetings and said, "You guys have 30 days to get your stuff together and start executing on the national development plan." So I think we're right there. Things will be focusing back on getting back to business, and we've set up the project really, really, really well. We've developed really true, strong relationships locally, worked with the local communities, put in the agreements. We've done all that base work that will allow this project to be developed and move it forward. So it's not a tomorrow catalyst, but it is now between the end of the year type catalyst.
Okay, so you talked about molybdenum at Mocoa. Some of our investors and people on this call may not be familiar with its uses. Could you maybe give us a crash course on it?
So Moly is interesting because it's a metal that is used in the highest and lightest and the highest temperature resistant steels in the world. So we are talking about high temperature turbines in wind power, and the blades. You want a very nice light resistant blade on wind power. So that is really what's driving the moly prices, which is today it's $25 a pound. And it's because of this energy transition that is required. And what most people don't know, the majority of moly is produced from copper moly deposits. But as copper projects continue to go lower and lower and lower and lower and lower grade, the moly grade also goes down. So moly is not about, you see here that we turn on the moly circuit at a certain price. It's not about the value of the moly, it's about how much copper you lose when you turn that circuit on. So as you recover your moly, you actually lose copper. And as your grades go lower, you lose more and more and more, and a bigger percentage of copper. And I think that causing the overall spike of moly prices is because copper projects can no longer effectively produce it without losing too much of the value of that $4 copper. Now, the Mocoa project, and if you look and you compare it to a lot of the other projects in the world, there's very few pure moly play projects. I would like everyone to look at the moly grade of the Mocoa project and understand that it is a moly percentage. It's not a moly sulfide percentage. If you look at a lot of the moly projects around the world, they report it in a moly sulfide form. Mocoa literally has moly grades that are very, very close to pure moly projects. And so that's why it's on a copper moly porphyry, it's probably about 4 times higher than the average of the ratio between copper and moly. So it is a super important copper project, and it is a super important moly project. The contained moly resource at Mocoa, I think, is a little over 200,000 tons, and the world production of moly is about 200,000 tons. So it puts it in perspective how big of a moly project it is, and moly demand will only continue to rise because there's lack of effective supply. So that's the moly portion of the Mocoa project.
Okay, we have a question here, Ian. What is the distance from surface of the ore body?
So the Mocoa project actually goes to surface. It does have a litho cap. It does have an oxide, and it wasn't really appreciated in the previous resource estimates because the moly portion of doesn't oxide. So it's a difficult question. If it was a standard copper project, I would say 50 to 100 meters, but a large portion of that litho cap will. So it's not a simple question. And the other part, I think I'm just going to guess into why the question is coming up, is we kind of have a best of both worlds because it's a very disseminated project, but it also has a center core where average grades are over a 1% on an equivalent basis. That's the core center high grade portion of the deposit. So it's very disseminated, but it also has higher grade core that would be very amenable to underground mining methods, which is one of the strategies we're looking at is making sure there's a pathway to get the project into production that is palatable by Colombia.
So when you talk about pathway to production, are there any technical studies such as a PEA that's being planned?
So first of all, Mocoa does have a historical pre-feasibility study, which established reserves at that time period. We are doing it internally. And this is obviously for multiple reasons. You do it internally because I don't want to be spending millions of dollars with outside consultants to be able to do that work, and looking at a core, smaller size pathway to production for the project, working together with Anglo-Asian. But I also don't want to put it out in a public report because of what happens if you do a smaller scale project into a PEA is market then believes that's the whole size of your project. And obviously Mocoa is 2 million tons of copper and it's open in all directions. It's only one of the porphyry centers that has been tested. So obviously it has a lot of leg room to continue. And the overall story for market for Macoa is the potential of the overall resource. But internally, we're doing that work because there is a baseline to develop a production a pathway to production, and that's more for Colombia. It's more to presidents are presidents for 4 years, and they want to understand and see a story that can align to their overall political goals, and that's a project that we're developing. Because if I took Macoa's value of copper dollars per pound in the ground of resource, it would probably be one of the most if not the most undervalued resource in the world. So it is also about de-risking the project and explaining to market, and having a pathway that shows how this project gets into production would be a massive catalyst for the value of the company. So I'm sorry I went in a roundabout, but there's a lot of thought is going into where we're going on the project.
Right. So, Ian, any other hurdles with maybe respect to infrastructure or other ways to get it to market? Any hurdles you foresee?
It's one of the things I love about, in Ecuador, when we did the Mirador project, we had to build a 120 megawatt run-of-river hydroelectric project, and build ports and build bridges and do all these things to get that project. But it was there was a political will to do it, right? I call Macoa the light version. We literally are on the national highway, and we're 5 kilometers away from it. We're between the interconnection between Colombia and Ecuador. There's 220 kVA power lines that run 5 kilometers from the project. We have a town that's about 50,000 people that is 10 kilometers away from the project, but nobody lives on the project. So I say if we were searching for potential life on other solar systems, it would be in that green belt, right? So you have excellent infrastructure, wonderful infrastructure. People are going to be going home at the end of the day when they go home from work, but we don't actually have to move anyone to put the project into place. So from an infrastructure standpoint, it's perfect. It's wonderfully located.
Right. So you mentioned during the presentation, Ian, you're a mining engineer. You have the support of Anglo-Asian to help support development. Are you planning on bringing on anyone else onto the management team to help develop Macoa?
I really think that we have the team, right? We have people that have the experience and the background of getting projects into production. Remember, it's myself in Ecuador. Rob Pease was Mount Milligan, our VPX, who is an amazing in terms of discovery and resource development. Also a part of some of the bigger projects that become future mines. So I don't think we really need to add on any more firepower to develop at this stage. Of course, many years in the future in a larger scale project would be a different story. But today we definitely have the experience, right? If we look around Macoa and we say, what are the closest 2 operating copper mines to those projects? And literally myself and the board have put those projects into production. I mean, so we have the background and the story.
All right.
I'm going to actually read through because there's a lot of different questions, and I think it would be nice to be able to just get through some of these because there's a lot of really great questions. I am very confident, and I think I saw a couple come together. Is a great question was, what happens if the mayor decides not to sign off? Luckily, and this is a very South American thing, there's something called administrative silence, where you only get a certain amount of time before you have to make a decision. So the mayor has to give in his report. The clock is ticking. The report is with him, and he's going to have to make a decision. So this financing has specifically been put into place to make sure that we have enough gasoline to get across that finish line to make sure that we're crossing over a major catalyst to move the company forward. And the backdrop, and I know there's some people that are very frustrated with me because they've heard a whole lot less out of us, but there's been a big restructuring in the company to really get things down and control costs to make sure that our burn rates are under control. And that's been a big focus of the company, to make sure that this next financing, it's a terrible market, gets us to some of those key catalysts. We're doing okay on the cash burn. I see this question. Our biggest burn was previously Colombia because we had a very big team. We had just started drilling. There's local hires, but that's been reduced now to, and it includes myself because I live in Colombia. We're getting down below $100,000 a month now overall in Colombia, which includes me, and getting that even lower to really tighten it up to make sure that we don't advance again until we have those key catalysts in place. So I think it was a lot of work, but it was tough. It was like I call it, we had to rip off a Band-Aid on it, but we've done it. Metallurgical test work. There is metallurgical test work that has been done on the Moly project. And the nice thing is, because that Moly grade, it's not highly disseminated Moly. It's really a Levy style. So separation of copper and Moly metallurgically, no issues there. No metallurgical test work done yet in Argentina, but I don't expect if I had to pick a copper concentrate, I'd pick a copper gold concentrate because the payable is so wonderful. So I don't see any major concerns on metallurgical work. So I do believe that this financing will get us across the line. Any plans concerning the share price? Investors had lots of anxiety, and I don't think this is something that's just shared by Libero, right? I mean, this is across the market, but I do like it. Somebody told me, until people are capitulating, then it's not the start of a bull market. And I do believe we're finally seeing some signals overall in market that we're about. Things could change very soon, right? It is frustrating when I pick up the cover of the Economist and it's talking about strategic metals and the importance of copper, and it's not showing up in equity markets, but that time will come. And so I think patience is very important. The assets that Libero literally has 2 million tons of copper sitting in the Moly project, and our current share valuation, it's like we are almost like we are a shell company. It's really crazy, but the patience overall will definitely pay off. Okay, so it's now scrolling. So I guess I do want to come back that we are currently doing a financing. It was a difficult decision that we had to make. I am personally participating in that because I have basically taken my entire paycheck and I'm dumping it into this financing, because to me it's insanity, our current pricing versus the projects that we have. I know how close we are in Argentina. I know how great of a overall roadmap we have in Colombia. And no, it's been very painful, but I know that we're on a pathway to create significant value for our shareholders. So I don't know if you can look through. So I see a question. It is a 0.75 equivalent copper at Esperanza, so it is about 0.57, but that gold overprint has a significant gold percentage, is where the copper equivalent gets to about 0.7 for the overall, and about 1% overall from the first 200 meters. So it is really a copper gold project where about a third of the value is coming from the gold. And I love this. The very first question is, we've all been extremely patient. I definitely feel that every single day, but I am also confident that the game plan and the process that we put into place will get us effectively across the finish line, and it will not just be able to drill a couple holes. Once either of these two projects, whether it's in Argentina or Colombia, start moving forward, it's going to be built off of a base that allows these projects to continuously move forward over an extended period of time. Locally, landowners, local government, national government, everything has been put into place to ensure that it's a long-term development story, not just get a couple drill holes. And that has always been the biggest part of the equation is, what if we just drilled a couple holes and we spiked, got the price up, but it's a short-term benefit, and these are deposits that have the potential to become future mines and create massive value for for shareholders over an extended period of time. And that has been the overall focus of the company, is to keep a long-term vision on these projects.
Okay, and just a few follow-up questions. How will the funds raised be spent and how long will they last?
Okay, so the funds raised, again, so overall we're getting below that $200,000 a month overall hurdle and be able to continue to get costs down, and it's been a big focus of the company, and the funds have really been put into place to make sure there's runway from here past the end of the year to make sure that if we ever do another additional financing, it's on one of the significant catalysts. And I think from this presentation, the closest one would be moving forward in Argentina. And I do think that that would be a catalyst that would create value because we see other projects in San Juan, the attention San Juan has, that you can still create value at the end of a drill bit in San Juan. So that is really the overall design, to make sure that we get across at a significant goal line, and that would be the one that's nearest term is in Argentina. So it's really just to make sure we have enough gasoline to get things started in Argentina, get drills turning before you have to do another financing, to make sure we're doing it on the back of a higher valuation.
Okay, what payments are left to make to Latin Metals?
Oh, that's a good question. We do have a December payment. I think it's about, oh man, don't quote me on this because I'll have to look up in the MD&A and the financial statements, but I think it's about $300,000 is the last, one of the final payments in the option agreement with Latin Metals, and it's the underlying option holder. Is coming up at the end of the year.
Okay, just a question here on how the audience can reach out to you if they have follow-up questions.
So I do get swamped with email, and I got the anxiety when I woke up this morning, and I got 500 unread emails, but I do read and get back directly to email. Some people even, I think my cell phone is included in most of the press releases, so a WhatsApp message also works. I do travel a lot, right? So I do spend, I'm living in Colombia, I'm up in BC, I'm down in Argentina, I'm going to different conferences. So I do spend a lot of time traveling, but I do try to get back when I can. So I think WhatsApp or an email. And I apologize if I don't see the first one. So don't be afraid to go, Ian, I asked you this question, you haven't answered me. And I will get back to emails. And obviously, Michelle, we have done some major reductions. So previously, if anybody had been writing to Alexandra, she is no longer with the company. But Michelle also, between her and I, we will try to get back. Just a little bit of patience, and don't be afraid to send me 2 or 3 to get you on the top of the inbox.
And then where will the presentation be available on your website, right?
I think it will be put up today. This version of the presentation will be up at the end of the day on our website, this version.
Okay, we've talked a lot about Mocoa and Argentina, but what about Big Bulk? Has your field season generated some targets this year?
And I didn't talk about it because this market really isn't valuing these earlier stage projects, but obviously we're doing a little bit of field work at Big Bulk. There is some things going on because Matt Wonder is an amazing geologist and has relooked at the overall project and has developed some really interesting targets that have gotten the interest of some of the major companies. So there is something going on in the background there to relook and reanalyze the overall project. But it's obviously not a project where I believe that early stage drilling is going to be rewarded in market. And that's the reason I haven't mentioned it, right? In a different market, they're amazing projects. But I really think that the Macola and the Argentina Esperanza projects are projects that will actually create value for shareholders in the near term. So yeah, we're in a field season right now, but it's mostly ground-based, not drilling at big bulk. And we might be able to pull a cat out of the bag on that because there is some overall interest on this new analyst interpretation that Matt has done, and got some of the big boys that are actually interested in seeing it. So.
Okay.
I won't go into too much detail because I'm a mining engineer, not a geologist, but there's some interesting things going on at Big Bulk.
Okay. Any thoughts you want to leave the audience with, Ian? Last minute thoughts.
I think what's really important is to see some of the big picture, the long-term story of copper. Everybody, I think, is a shareholder because they've heard that story and understand it. It's been a difficult journey. This market has been very difficult for many, the majority of exploration juniors. But I'm seeing those catalysts today in terms of within Libero and also within the general market. There's overall a very big world interest, and I think that all of this will be bearing fruit for all of us that are true believers. Overall, Libero has an amazing assets. We have an amazing group of people that are working on these assets, and those catalysts are now. I know it's been frustrating. It's been frustrating for all of us to get a couple of these things across the finish line in a bad market. But we are literally with our faces pushed up against the candy store right now, and we will be rewarded for sticking in
there. Okay, well, Ian, thank you so much for taking time to host this webinar with us today. Just as a reminder for our audience, our next webinar will feature Enviro Gold, and that's tomorrow, August 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.